Now it works.
Greetings. This is Deja Bliss. I'm here with my dear friend and brilliant mind, Iam Bloom, out there in Los Angeles, California. Thank you for joining me today.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. So Iam is one of the men that I know in this world living in his divine presence, who embodies his sensual nature from my perspective in a healthy way and sees that in women. So I'm excited to have this conversation about you and with you about sensuality. So you want to start by just sharing a little bit about what you're up to down there?
What I'm up to. So at the moment, I'm trying to get some film and television stuff up and running. Got into the entertainment industry with a friend of mine who'd been in it for a long time. Trying to get a tech company up and running in that same vein. I just kind of existing down here with my girlfriend, and that's about my life.
Awesome. Now you are a linguist, yes? You just
Yes. So my background academically is in philosophy and religion, as well as linguistics and teaching English as a second language. But I have been involved in, I guess, the occult. I guess would be the nice broad way of looking at it, philosophy and the occult, probably since I was about 9 or 10. And
yeah. One thing I love about you and our conversations.
Yeah, my biggest problem is the fact that my internal truth compass is not broken. So when people try to tell me that this is the truth, and I'm like, no, that's not the truth. I may not be able to articulate it fully what it is, but that's not it. So that's
okay. Cool. So I'm excited to have this conversation about you. So I want to just open right up and say thank you for joining me in this journey that I've created, and really to like explain it to you here in a moment and just reword it for those who are watching. Is this journey is about embracing and embodying the sensual nature, first in women, where women maybe have felt uncomfortable or fearful even being sensual or dropping into sensuality for fear that it's coupled too closely with or could be misconstrued as sexuality. And to be able to pry those two apart, because I really feel like the sensual nature is where a power source comes from, an empowerment for women. And from the male perspective, to also remind and encourage that man also has this sensual nature, though it maybe shows up very differently. And so I wanted to have the conversation with you. What is sensuality to you?
the sensuality. So I suppose the first thing that comes up, right, is just the meaning of the words, right? Sensuality has to do with the senses. Sexuality has to do with sex. And while I could probably go on an hour-long conversation about sex and what sex is, let's just focus on sensuality for a second, right? A lot of it has to do with self-care, in my opinion. Sensuality is like hot showers, nice baths, good food, good company, good music, wearing nice clothes that feel good on your skin. Like it's everything that goes into your body's experience in the world. And any good a Taurus will tell you that how they feel in their body is everything. That is the space that you have to be in to really allow yourself to journey beyond that, right? And while we understand ourselves to be much larger beings, right, we are consciousness that just happens to envelop this particular body's experience, but taking care of every aspect of that is essential, I think, to really being able to be in your truth and be who you are and have some clarity about where you want to go. So sensuality for me is a lot of what might be considered indulging. I don't know. Maybe I would call it indulging, like indulging in, nicer.
Indulging in the self, maybe.
Indulging in the self. Like I love my chocolate. Chocolate is my sacrament. So having a good piece of chocolate every once in a while feels indulgent a little bit. Or daily, or good beer, or good meal. Having really good ingredients to cook with. So it can look like a lot of different things. And I think you're right. I think how it looks for men and how it looks for women is slightly different. I think for women, it can be construed as sexual when in fact it's just being present in yourself and being the wonderful beings that you are. And I think for men, it can be seen as homosexual or metrosexual or like feminine in some way, because there's still sort of this cultural story that says men are hard warriors who can deal with the cold and the harsh, and they don't need anything other than their own truth and justice and desire to make something better. And I think that does a great disservice to men in general.
Thank you for saying that. Absolutely. Both of those things I think are huge. So as a man who understands sensuality in the same way that I do, what would you offer to other men about seeing this sensual nature in women and being able to honor it as sensuality rather than a sexual invitation?
Right. So again, with this cultural story, perhaps, is that men are sort of always trying to get to the climax of sex, right? Get to the climax of situations, and that isn't necessarily what it's about. For any man who's been out there who understands that you indulge the women in your life in the sensuality that they are and that they express, and you get gifts back, like whether that's your mother, whether that's your sisters, whether that's the women in your life, your significant other, when you sort of help give them the space to just be the full expression of themselves, you get everything that you want. And they may not necessarily end with some kind of sexual gratification, but the energy that exists between that can be just as potent and just as powerful and just as creative.
So when you say give them the space and give them the sensual experience that they want, how does that show up? How does that look for a man to do? If a man is sitting here listening and clueless to what you mean, what does that mean?
Ooh, we as men have the gift of holding space. And that essentially means that we sort of create the sandbox for people to be in. An example of that would be, let's say you are out in a club and you're having a good time and you see some women or woman who sort of gets your attention and you want to spend time with them. You approach it in such a way that you're not thinking, oh, I'm going to get in your pants, or, oh, you're really hot. Like there's a sexual thing that's happening, and just allow them to be the sensual creature that they are. Like if they're there to sort of dance. They're there to sort of move, maybe enjoy the company of other people, or how other people can see them in that moment. And if you just are with them, right, you're just dancing with them in that situation, and maybe even sort of helping to curb away other men who might be like very aggressive and very much about that sexual nature, just essentially like physically giving them space sometimes can go a long way to just letting them feel comfortable to really be in their truth and in themselves. It takes a lot of different forms, and it takes a bit of sensitivity. And I think the greatest advantage that most men have, a skill that they very rarely ever cultivate, is the ability to really be sensitive to what is necessary in the moment that's happening. And sometimes we ignore that, and sometimes we just don't really think about that. We think about our own needs and desires. And if we just pause a moment, breathe a moment, just sort of look at the situation and say, what feels the best for this person or in this situation? And I think most of the time they're going to know, oh, I should be either protective, or I should be open, or I should be conversational, or I should be, or wait to be invited, which is another thing that I think gets lost a lot.
Right. The wait to be invited. True. I think, at least in my experience, many men start along this path that you're talking about of space holding. I only want to hold it open just so long enough as until the woman is like feeling really like, oh, they've got my back, and becomes more vulnerable. And then the agenda changes suddenly. And this is where I think women feel like unsure about being sensual, because they aren't feeling comfortable that they can continue to be themselves once they've opened, that suddenly they're going to, their sensuality will be preyed upon.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I could see that. There definitely is an element that happens where you're right. There are men who are like, this is a trick. I do this thing, and then they're in a space where I can sort of pounce on it.
Mm-hmm.
But
so how do we talk to that space?
How do we talk to that space? So sex is an exchange, right? Sex is essentially trying to play out in a physical space what is actually happening in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
The people that you attract are a reflection of what is happening in yourself, right? There is a masculine and feminine energy within each one of us, and it is always at play. So unfortunately, if you're the type of man who constantly is attracted to and brings in women who are sort of waiting to be taken advantage of, that says something about what is going on inside of you. There's some part of you that feels vulnerable. Unfortunately, on the same side, for women who bring in these men who are constantly preying on them, right? Again, this is sort of looking at what is actually happening in themselves. Rated. So what this really speaks to is like an imbalance, right? If there is a man who is willing to give you that space, but maybe they're giving you that space with the intention of taking advantage, then you as the woman, you can be in your feminine, sensual place, and when that moment comes, you may have to step into your masculine power and be, no, this is as far as it goes. And the same thing for men. Like, you can't always be pushing, right? The feminine energy sort of allows things to come to you. And the greatest gift, again, that we as men can give is this space of feeling protected, of feeling safe. And that means safe from yourself as well. Like, if they want you, they will invite you. Or, if you're really allowing that sense of attraction coming into you, you're holding this space. That's the masculine part. You're holding the space. And the person in that space finally comes towards you. That's the invitation, right? That's the moment. Consent, such a big thing. Yeah. But you can't look at the sensuality that's being expressed as an invitation to be sexual. In a sensual space may become sexual, but that has to be something that is really initiated by women. I mean, women are sex. They really are. And men, we get to be a part of that or not, and we get to have our own space within ourselves. But we can't initiate that part of the process. And I think that has also been part of the cultural story, where women have to be pursued, and they're the ones that have to consent to this devouring thing that's trying to happen, and that we're constantly telling men, you have to go out and you have to get them, and you have to sort of force them into this situation, which isn't true. Women should be the one. And I have found this in my own personal experience, that when a woman comes to you and you're receptive to that, they are the initiators. And in that process, you can actually be in that more sacred expression of this relationship inside of you, this physical thing that's now happening, where you're embodying your masculine and her masculine, she's embodying your feminine and her feminine, and you guys can come together in that way.
This is so good. This is so good.
It's really, the best.
It is really important, because I feel like what you're talking about is a process that's going on in a lot of women, and yet there's this confusion, and I can even speak from my own experience, where the woman's like, wait, am I the one who's supposed to pursue? Does that make me the man? Like, does that make me the masculine? And so then the women go, wait, shouldn't I fall back into being pursued? Like, don't I want to pursue? But then we're wanting to be empowered in our sensuality. So then there's this confusion, like, do I allow it or do I pursue it? And what you just spoke to is like the clarification of that, really, which is that a woman who is feeling empowered and does feel receptive and is ready to engage in that way, then her permission for that to occur is her pursuit of the man. That's her permission.
Exactly. And, you know, if for those of you out there, if you need another example, like women, think about what is attractive to you. If you really are someone who's really attracted to somebody coming on really strong and you submitting to them, great. That's how you work. That's how your expression is. If you're someone who sort of is in your space and somebody comes at you and you're like, I didn't invite you in my space, then you know you have to be the one to, when you're ready for that, to be the initiator. Even if that's just come home. Come over for coffee or tea, right? Or whatever the case may be. And we all work a little bit different, right? We fall on this spectrum of masculine and feminine expression in any given moment on kind of a spectrum. Right. We have to gauge what is attractive to us, what is it that we want, what are we bringing into our lives, what are we willing to bring into a submission place, right? Because I know plenty of men who just want to submit. I know plenty of women who just want to submit. On the other side, I know plenty of men who really just want to be in control. Right. And women who want to be in control. And there are various reasons for that. But I think as humans, we need to be on both ends of that from time to time. Like I remember telling my girlfriend early on in our relationship, I'm like, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to want to be in charge. But that one time, if you just take it, that's great. Right? That's a gift that you can give me. And so we are still trying to navigate exactly what that looks like from time to time. But,
and that's a very vulnerable space for everyone. So
exactly.
Yeah. So taking this back out of the bedroom and to the sensuality conversation, and I super appreciate all that we just covered, but the question pops into my mind, can we learn to be together as humans and honoring this sensual space without it being like just the women with their gay friend, like the gay man friend, like can men and women commingle, like in that very like platonic but sensually charged space? Can we learn to navigate that? And if so, like what steps can we take to allow that reality to be more present with us?
Okay, so there's a couple things in there that I want to sort of pull out, right? So the first part is this idea of platonic, right? We speak to platonic forms. We're talking about Plato and how he had these idealized ways that things are and that things interact. And so we say a platonic, it has taken on a more modern interpretation of non-sexual, when in fact what it means is sort of the ideal, right? We're going for an ideal. So keeping that in mind, I think is also useful for thinking about this. Speaking to the next part, one of the great joys in life is sexual anticipation, and that is a sensual pleasure. And it doesn't need to go beyond just that feeling inside of yourself. Right. So again, men are sort of taught to, I feel this thing, it needs to happen, versus women who are like, I feel this thing, do I want something to happen? And I think we should be asking ourselves, do we want something to happen? And maybe it's just, for right now, this is great. Like we're giving each other massages and we're sort of enjoying this really nice food and this really nice drink, and it's fine. It doesn't need to be anything more than that. We're just taking care of and nourishing and sort of indulging ourselves, taking care of ourselves. It's good. It's hard though. It's hard though. Yeah.
Just because what you're just describing, it makes me think of, okay, these tantric kind of like workshops that people go to where they learn how to just be with each other and not like think it's going to go anywhere, but experience the pleasures of each other. I also feel like rather than thinking, do I want this to go somewhere or is this going to go somewhere? I had this conversation the other day with someone where if you just feel energy between you and someone else, can't we just feel it without, like, with nothing beyond the feeling? Like, can we just realize that's like our life force, our kundalini just activated, and doesn't it just feel yummy to feel that? Like, isn't that just feel good? And just to like be able to hang out in that space for a minute without jumping into the future, and just really like learning to enjoy and be satiated by our own stimulation of a situation or a person, without
Right.
it really needing to do anything else.
Do I think it's possible? Yes. I have had that in my experience myself. It's quite delicious, and I enjoy it a lot. Unfortunately, there's still a large cultural element, right, that a lot of people are still dealing with. And until you can step out of that completely, I think it's really difficult, right? I can recall a specific experience that I had where there was a new friend that I had made. She was telling me about some body pains that she had. I had said, hey, I'm more than happy to give you a massage. She comes over and I give her a massage, and I'm like, I feel like there's some other work that I could do, but it's in places that might feel sexual. This isn't sexual to me. I'm just trying to help cultivate a really good space for you to get through this pain. And at the time she was like, oh yeah, that's fine. I'll let you know if you cross the line. And the rest of the massage went well. She felt really good afterwards. I thought we parted on really good terms. And then 2 days later, she says, I can't talk to you. You tried to take advantage of me. This was not appropriate. This was not okay. And
that's where the social programming comes.
Yeah. And I had to sort of take a moment and be like, well, what did I overstep? Did I do something wrong? And really looking at it and go, I didn't. Like, I asked her permission. I told her what was happening. I told her how it might come across, and that where my space was. And she decided after the fact, reviewing it, sort of putting it in this cultural filter, that
she was too much in a vulnerable space. She didn't make clear decisions. Sure.
However it got interpreted. I never had the opportunity to speak with her afterwards, so I don't know if she decided that it was something different later, or if something else had happened later that day or the next day that made her reevaluate that situation. But I also understand as a man, like I'm sort of naturally looked at as the predator in some ways, and that is really difficult to reconcile because I'm not.
I will mirror that. As a woman, I feel like we're naturally looked at as a victim, and I also am like, I'm not okay with that either, because that does set us up in scenes. I found myself in scenes where, I thought I was giving consent and also getting consent, and then the situation became misconstrued when I said that I wasn't giving consent at this particular, like in this way, that I was somehow being like mean and nasty and cold. And, like it turned out that now suddenly I was preying on his vulnerability because I was not any longer the victim or the one being preyed upon. And it's like a very confusing social construct when you're waking up and you're trying to like be more empowered. And so I love this conversation, and I guess the question comes down to a personal empowerment around the thing, right?
Yeah, I think it very much begins with recognizing what you enjoy and trying to give yourself the space to just enjoy it. Mm-hmm. Just really feel what that does for you. Whether that's, a nice hot bath, whether that's a nice hot shower, whether that's some really good food that you just really love, whether that's, getting some new article of clothing that just feels really nice on your skin, just be with that and really
back up to the simple stuff, right?
That it's all incredibly simple and profound. As most of our conversations, Seja, end up going, this is not complicated, but this is not easy. And it's okay that it's not easy, and it's okay that it's not complicated. Right. Don't get stuck in your head and think, I should be here now, when you're right here. And that's okay. Where you are is exactly where you need to be. And you sort of naturally find the next step. I think the biggest advice I have for men is it's never wrong to take another 5 seconds to think about what you're doing, how you're doing it, or what the temperature of the room is, how everything feels around you. Take that time. You will not miss something. I guarantee it. You will not miss something if you just take those moments. And as for women, I think it's always difficult to say no. It's always difficult to say here's the line. But the more you can do that, the more you give yourself that space. So if you don't have somebody in your life who can give you that space, you can give you that space. And the more you're able to give you that space, and you're sort of cultivating this better relationship with the masculine force within yourself, naturally an external expression of that will eventually come into your orbit. That is just how the universe works.
And on that note, I want to go back to what you said about taking care, and, like if you love a good food, enjoy the food. If you love a hot shower, enjoy the shower. Because if we can't give ourselves those simple pleasures and really like let ourselves enjoy our bodies and our senses, then certainly when we get into a situation with someone else who wants to enjoy us, that we're also going to have that, oh, I can't, like filter on us and like create it into something else in our minds, right?
It's that cultural meme. You can only truly love someone when you love yourself. You can only truly give your sensuality when you're involved in your own sensuality. You can't give anything that you're not willing to give to yourself. And if you can give it to yourself, you can give it to somebody else, or experience it with someone else. So yeah, I would agree with that.
So good. Well, is there anything else you have to say on the matter?
I'm rereading Stranger in a Strange Land, which is one of my favorite books by Robert Heinlein, and it's sort of a science-fi book. But one of the things that's really in it is that he talks about there isn't ever a need for hurry or to rush. If at any point you feel like you have to do something immediately, like those are the perfect moments to just take a breath. Those are the perfect moments to just take a beat. Yes, you have to get to places on time. Yes, you have to meet your obligations. But doing it with this hurry thing usually leads to mistakes, usually leads to accidents, usually leads to not being present. And being present and doing things quickly is a very different sensation, from my own personal experience. And I think Stacia can attest to this as well. When you're in that space, what takes a minute seems like it takes a nice leisurely 5 minutes, and there's not any stress, and things just sort of go, and you're able to navigate the requirements that are given to you every day a little bit easier. And I think that also goes towards that sensuality, that goes toward that nourishing of yourself.
Thank you. That's perfect. I also believe that slow natured presence is the sensuality, just like you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
When we're okay, I was just giving a video the other day of, instead of like hurrying to get all your chores done around the house, like dance around and grab them slowly and sing to them, or whatever it is that allows you to really be with what you're doing, not as a list of things to do, because that is what we've called the masculine nature. But it's like the masculine nature in that sense doesn't seem to apply anymore to me, because I'm seeing this sensual self, soaking both sides of us. So instead, I would say that's this quickness that you're talking about, that now I'm going to start referring to as an old paradigm way of going about things, that we would hurry and just check things off of a list. We can still get that same list accomplished by enjoying the thing.
For sure. Yeah, I'm a firm believer that if you're doing anything in your life that you don't completely enjoy, why are you doing it?
Yeah, anything.
And I know that's hard to look at and be like, well, I got to work, I got to do my job. But you can find a job that serves you a little bit better. Or maybe you can just approach how you're doing your job to serve you a little bit better. Or, the obligations you have with your kids or your family or wherever you find yourself. Like, yes, there are responsibilities and obligations that you have given yourself. But how you approach that is everything. If you,
And, as an entrepreneur, like I often find myself saying, okay, that's something I do not want to do. I'm creating a person in my life to do that thing because I don't enjoy it and I'm not going to pretend to. I'm manifesting this assistant or this, like person to do numbers or whatever. And to give ourselves that option as like a indulgence that you're talking about at the beginning,
oh
as
yeah,
a pleasant indulgence to be able to continue to live in enjoyment. And that if we're doing that, we are accessing our life force, we are accessing presence, and all the energy needed to create that thing that we don't want to do is available to us
right.
by owning that, right? By just really like
Completely. I always think of kids and how kids manifest things in life all the time. Like it's amazing to me how how the kid's need is always met, and it may not always be how you anticipate, and it may not always be the way you envision, but it's always met. And part of that comes from the fact that they're always in a place of enjoyment. Everything's new, everything's exciting. They want to soak everything up and understand everything that's happening around them, which is why they ask so many annoying questions. So please have patience. But they also have a complete belief and understanding that their needs will be met. They will never go hungry. They will never go tired. They will never go without a place, as long as that is allowed to happen. And we can be in the same place. I always think, look, every time I look at Hermetic philosophy and, like the old mythical schools, the Hermetic Dawn and everything else, like one of the things that always rings out to me is you go back to a beginner's mind. You go back to being a child. You go back to being the fool if you're looking at the tarot, right? You always go back to that place where you have absolute faith, even if your mind or your heart can't figure out how something's going to happen. The how doesn't matter. The how is up to the universe. This is part of the contract that we have. As long as we believe that it's going to happen, as long as we have faith that it's going to happen, and then also you can look at that and be like, oh, that's so easy to say, but how do you actually do that? It's not going to just drop from the sky. Yes, it's not going to just drop from the sky, and it's probably not going to look the way that you anticipate, but it will show up, and all you have to do is say yes.
Your doorstep. It just might.
It could. That's happening a little bit more often.
Yeah, that's happened to me a lot, actually. Like we don't give ourselves enough credit for the magnetic beings that we are to be able to draw in when we have a strong intention and it aligns with us and we feel it in our being, that it will actually oftentimes just come right to us.
Yeah, that's, the only reason it takes time between saying I need the thing to the thing showing up is your own belief about how long it should take to go from one to the other. There really is no reason why we can't just go, oh, money, or food, or new piece of clothing, instantaneously, other than our expectations, cultural expectations, and these stories that we constantly telling ourselves.
And by the same token, someone deciding to drop into their sensual nature, it also is a split moment decision. Every moment that you make it or don't make it, I've had clients where, we're working together about what's keeping them from expressing that. And they will literally give me a list of excuses until they're ready to not have those excuses. Those are the only thing keeping someone between the embodiment and where they are now, is this list of excuses that if you can just stop saying them, like stop giving them energy, stop. It's that fast. And yet we will take the time that we need to stop that.
As I said before, very simple, not easy. Not easy at all. But if you can do it, you will see change.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. This is just a hugely valuable conversation. I'm so appreciative of you taking the time to talk to me. Forever grateful. Just so much wisdom here, my dear. So thank you for sharing your space this day and your knowledge and your wisdom.
Yeah. Thank you for creating this space to have these conversations, and thank you for drawing in the people that need to see this, and you know, as we continue on. I mean, arbitrary dates, you know, like 2012 was a big deal, and it still is, and we're still seeing reverberations of that. But like 2020 is one of those things that has always been sitting in my mind, and I'm like, we're so close, and there's so many changes, and there's so many things going on.
Yeah.
And watching the old way of doing things just fighting tooth and nail to stay relevant or in your consciousness, and just, you know, letting it go, letting it change is it's a process.
So true. All right. Thank you. And we're out.